While I was a mere fetus during the 90s, I am also relatively hyperthymesionic about the past and what was going on when it came to the LGBTQ whatever movement that was going on in those decades. I'm well aware that in the 90s, trans individuals were more scrutinized and more discriminated against than they are in this current present time that we are in. There was little media coverage, there was little visibility, yada, yada, yada. It was still kind of like obviously a very hush-hush concept that in the 80s was also met with extra hurdles of discrimination due to the AIDS epidemic, from my understanding. I think it wasn't until Princess Diana had shook hands with an AIDS afflicted individual that people actually started to calm down their immediate judgment of avoidance when it came to someone that was afflicted with HIV or something in that regard. But in and of itself, the entirety of the gay community was definitely affected by the AIDS epidemic in that regard, given the fact that that demographic was more obviously affected by that said virus or what have you. Not trying to get off on tangent, but I'm, again, very much aware of the discrimination that was being held against a community that did not really have that much knowledge of not only itself, but also just in the public's eye and whatnot. It was still a new concept that was being reintroduced into society once again, much like when in the 90s with Dr. Magnus Herschel was doing his little experiments on individuals in regards to, in the name of science and sex research, if you will. While you are entitled to believe that I am aggressive with my thoughts or how I'm spewing about or being against my own sort of community, I still beg to differ. It's my personal theory that the trans community, in which I am at default a part of, was kind of given an opportunity to show if they were mature or not to be, I guess, welcomed in a community in which it's not so welcoming at this current state. But let me elaborate. I transitioned about 10 years ago, 10 months before the glamorization of the community when Caitlyn Jenner had come out as trans. And let me tell you, that was what I call the opportunity that we were given as a community to prove our maturity in handling the publicity of the community in terms of the amount of spotlight, media, and coverage that we have been given. A spotlight that was undeserving, to be quite frank, because of the fact that Caitlyn Jenner had glamorized a community that's not so fucking glamorous. It is unsafe. It is very misunderstood, and very misunderstood even by the individuals that are a part of the community as well, because it's a very complex sort of decision to make on your livelihood that is very permanent depending on how far you go. And the essential, I guess, push onto children regardless, because it became a trend after Caitlyn Jenner had glamorized or popularized a community that wasn't as much of a, didn't have much of a spotlight. And yes, it was visible, but not as, it was slowly becoming visible, not forcibly, in my opinion, how it became forcibly visible after Caitlyn Jenner's again coming out as trans and also being Woman of the Year for controversial reasons, and I'm not going to get into that. And unfortunately, these last 10 years was a failed opportunity for the trans community to, again, prove their worth or prove their maturity in, being themselves. It's unfortunately a very hypersexualized, a very fetishized community that I don't know if it'll ever not be that. I did have an inkling of hope at one point, however, before COVID and before that whole ordeal, in terms of the potentiality of actual societal acceptance in the trans aspect in and of itself. But then the gay community, or LGBT, took it a little bit too far and started really kind of pushing it down people's throats, almost forcibly. It seemed as if it was something that kids needed to be exposed to, which I don't feel as though LGBT anything ideology should be exposed to children, because it really plants a sexual potential seed in their head, which is not not right, in my opinion. I mean, my transition was a trauma response that was catalyzed by my ex-husband. Was also the best stupidest decision I've ever made in my entire life. But that being said, had I not been exposed to such sex and stuff like that, I may or may not have actually made that decision. You know what I mean? Because I was the trauma response aspect. Anyway.